to see us because I'm outside of the remote session and the camera doesn't work when I do that. So apologies, but we'll be able to share a screen, and if you can hear us, then I think we'll be able to get the information to everybody just fine.
Great. And I see that we are live. So Michelle, are we good to go? Kara, are we good to go?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. I still can't hear you, but I think we'll be okay if I leave the door open.
Can everyone else hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Michelle,
Yes.
it looks like it's just you then. Okay. Because we have a busy schedule, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. It is Wednesday, September 23rd, 10:33 a.m. and I'm gonna call the Public Works Committee to order. We have on our screen ways to participate. We continue to meet virtually. You can register to join the webinar at www.missoulapublicmeetings.com, or you can go to the city's website. In order to provide public comment, you need to raise your hand by dialing *9, and that way you'll get prompted to provide public comment. You can always leave comments for us via voicemail, 406-552-6012, or you can email council@missoula.mt.us. I am going to do a quick, let's see who's here. Stacy Anderson. I think she's here.
Present.
Great. Becerra is present. Contos.
Here.
Harp is absent, I believe. Hess.
Present.
Jones.
Present.
Merritt.
Here.
Ramos, I believe, is absent. Cheryl.
Present.
Vasika.
Present.
Von Lossberg.
Here.
And West. I don't think she's here yet, so we'll put her absent. Okay, we have minutes to approve from September 16th. Any changes or amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. I will see if we have any public comment. This is an opportunity to provide public comment on items not on the agenda. And we don't have anyone from the public attending. So we will move on to first item of business, and that is a professional service agreement amendment with WGM Group for the Zip Beverage Waterline Connection Project, and Logan is here to present, I think.
Hello. I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. So I'm Logan McInnes, Utilities Engineer with Public Works. And so yes, this is an amendment for the contract with WGM. So we did some work to run a new water line into the city shop slash Zip Beverage building, so that we can then take out an old piece of main that's could be leaking, and it's in the contaminated soils area. So it's kind of an important project to get a new water service to that building, so we can take that piece of main out of service. And I guess the change is just, issues that we couldn't have foreseen dealing with DEQ approval, because any dirt you disturb on that site, you have to get, submit a report, and then DEQ has to approve how you handle the soil. So there were just some unanticipated issues there dealing with the DEQ. So that's the nature of the change order.
Great. And the total cost for that is not to exceed 7,788, and that's coming out of the that's part of the budget,
Just
correct?
out of the water utility fund, yeah, from
Yeah.
our,
Okay. Any questions from staff or anyone cares to make the motion?
I'd be happy to make the motion.
Who was that? Amber. Okay. Ms. Cheryl has made the motion. I will check for public comment. No public. And I see Ms. West has joined the meeting, so we can mark her present. Okay, so can we get a roll call vote, please?
Should be just a second.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna go to vote. Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Yes.
Thank you. Vasika,
Yes.
Von Lossberg,
Yeah.
sorry, Mr. Von Lossberg once again.
Yes, sorry.
West,
Yes. Yes.
don't think we missed anybody.
Yeah, staff, you missed Merritt, but I abstain. But I do need to have that on the record that I abstained.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back. So we have 9 yes and 1 abstain.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Logan, and that will be on our consent agenda.
all right, thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Title 12 updates, and Kevin and Monty and maybe Ida will be sharing that information. This is, oh, we did change this is an informational item only now. I'll let Kevin inform us of what the next step is.
Okay, Kevin Slovart, city engineer. We've already set the public hearing during the previous presentation last month. And I think what we need to do is maybe have a new motion because of the addition of chapter 1201 to the ordinance bill. So I think I'd like to read that or have that read again to set the set the same public hearing. I think it was for October 12th or 5th.
5th.
Thank you, Monty. Yes, October 5th. And so that is correctly noticed.
Okay.
And what I wanted to do was, okay, I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and Kevin, if you have the revised motion as part of the presentation, then maybe at the end of it, we can read it and make sure that that it's entered into the record.
Okay. Yep. Well, the first document we're going to share is the ordinance bill, and that language should be able to be seen on the screen.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's at the top of that document that we currently have up. Does everybody see that document?
Yep.
Well, I can see
Okay.
it. I found it.
So, kind of picking up where we left off last month with this, I gave a presentation on a broad brush overview of these chapters in Title 12 that we would like to update, and the reasons for those. This particular meeting, we wanted to get into some more of the specifics in a couple of the new chapters, 1210 right-of-way improvements and 1217, which is parking facilities. So we're going to go through those in more detail. But what I needed to do, what I needed to start out with is to really introduce this chapter 1201. We hadn't talked about that last time because this just kind of came about between last time we met and now. But what this chapter 1201 does, this general provisions, is it allows the public works director and the city engineer to develop the public works manual as an admin rule, which will implement, interpret, or prescribe city law or policy or describe city practice. Basically, it's the design and construction standards and the procedure with respect to the subject matter found in Title 12. So that's generally what it does. Prior to its adoption, admin rules must be publicly noticed for 2 weeks. Any update to the public works manual will meet this 2-week public notice requirement by being referred by staff to the Public Works Committee for discussion. And then lastly, related to this new chapter, is the manual and the specifications as authorized as an admin rule will be enforced as a municipal infraction per state law. And generally, the municipal infraction will be a civil penalty rather than a criminal penalty, which is essentially what we have now, a criminal penalty for any Title 12 offenses. So we're essentially, by doing this, we're decriminalizing offenses to the standards and specifications. So we wanted to point those things out. And I guess that's what I had to say about the new chapter 1201. And what I wanted to add then is I'm going through these, this presentation and this information. If anybody wants to interrupt and ask a question, please do so. So maybe I'll stop there and ask a question or ask if there are any questions related to 1201. No? Okay.
I do
What-
see Julie Merritt and then Gwen Jones. Go ahead, Julie.
Sorry, I feel like I'm maybe not up to speed. So does that change that's being proposed with this 1201 apply to the entire Title 12? So that nothing that's in Title 12 will could be a criminal offense, that everything will be a civil offense? Does that question even make sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think the answer is listed in that second section. I think it applies to everything but chapter 1240.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Jones?
Thank you. I think actually my question applies to definitions under 12.02. So I will wait because I think
Okay.
he's doing that next. Sorry to jump the gun.
It's okay. Okay, Kevin, you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, next is 1202. I really hadn't planned to talk much about that because I introduced it last time and just some minor changes to language took place. So I already mentioned that. Okay, so I guess, yeah, if there's questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Go ahead, Gwen.
Thank you. Okay. I'll go now. So my question or comment was about the right-of-way definition. And I kind of thought of this after you've presented a week or two ago. And since we were hearing this today, thought I'd bring up the issue. And that is that while I was Parks Chair, periodically there would just be scenarios where there's street work going on or some right-of-way work going on or construction, and there needed to be more cross communication regarding the boulevard trees. And so I'm looking at the right-of-way improvements, that section definition. And I'm wondering if we need to include landscaping or boulevard tree. Well, landscaping is in there, but boulevard trees specifically, I know that there's been a reorganization, but I'm wondering if also, since this is kind of our outward facing document to the public, if having some specific language regarding boulevard trees would be helpful so that we kind of get on the same page in terms of including that comprehensively in our future approaches when work is done. Because it just seems like that issue periodically crops up. And not only do we need to communicate more amongst departments so that a tree doesn't get cut down and then we can't do anything about it, but also to the public. So I kind of wanted to put that out there.
Okay. Yeah, within the definition, it says boulevard or medium improvements, which would certainly include trees. It does have landscaping further on in the definition, but that's not a change we shouldn't make. So we can add boulevard trees into the definition.
Thanks. And perhaps there are other places in the rest of this document too, where kind of reemphasizing that would be helpful. And I'm not as familiar with this as you guys are, but I appreciate that attention paid to that. I just think our boulevard trees are becoming more and more important as our summers are getting hotter. And so to really make sure that we're comprehensively approaching that, I appreciate the boulevard tree focus.
Okay, yeah, and we will do that. We'll look through the remainder of the documents and add that that type of language to the statements where it's applicable.
Great, thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions on 1202? Okay, then, so this is where we get into a few more specifics, and Monty has the chapter up, and this is a track changes version that we can get to folks if you need to or want it to see what actually was done. I'm going to go through basically the sections, essentially almost one at a time to document what we did, and you know, if language changed, really to answer the why question of why it changed. So, and again, please stop me if you have any questions that come up along the way. Okay, so the first 4 sections, 10. Okay. Before I get into the first 4 sections, sorry, I wanted to mention that as we're going through this, you'll see some of this highlighted text, this blue text. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to remove that text from the code, and because it's going to be in the manual, we've already placed the language that is currently in code into the manual. We feel like these are the manual information that people would go to the manual to find that information instead of going to code to find it in there. So that's why we're going to remove that. And since the manual and the code will be adopted at the same time, I think that date is November 18th. We can just basically remove that text from the code as we go. Okay, so you got to go back to 1210. Okay, so the first 4 sections, 10 through 40, we didn't have any changes. In section 50, we added a reference to the engineering fee schedule. And that's done by resolution. You set those fees by resolution every year. The next section 60 regarding permit fees for right-of-way improvements, we removed language about private property paving, as this section or this chapter is essentially about right-of-way improvements. The chapter regarding private property paving is 1217, which we'll talk about soon. We added a section about fees set by resolution for city-initiated projects. And then we also added a section about plan review fees and resubmittal fees. And these fees, plan review and resubmittal fees, have not been established yet. But we wanted language in there to give us that option in the future. And I want to mention again that any fee changes or these types of fees, these potential fees, plan review fee and resubmittal fee, will be included in that resolution. So you'll see those again and be able to vote on those separately than just approving this language herein. So wanted to mention that. I'll pause there because that may be something that a council member wants to talk about potentially. So any questions related to that?
Julie.
Sorry, my question isn't really related to that, Kevin. But going back to the interaction between the code and the manual, will this allow updates as needed to the manual without having to reopen and revise the code? Is that the idea?
Yes, that's exactly the idea. That's why, yes, we're removing that design and construction language from the code and moving it to the manual. So when it needs to be updated, we'll update it in the manual and not have to open up code and update it in code. So really what we're trying to do is have information in one place and not duplicated in 2 places. So we have to basically update code and the manual every time something changes. And I want to mention again that when we do go through manual updates, typically they'll probably be once a year in November, but I think Ida's going to get into that later today. But we are going to bring those updates to the manual to Public Works Committee and discuss those. So you'll have an opportunity to review future updates to the manual.
Quick follow-up, Merita?
Go ahead.
I just would suggest that thank you, Kevin, for that, and I'm glad that the plan and bring that in front of Public Works Committee. I think that gives a good opportunity for the public to be involved. But I do hope that all along the way that we're getting and incorporating feedback from the members of the public who utilize the manual, and that we make sure that that those folks are well informed when we do make updates, so that people aren't caught in the middle of thinking that they're in compliance with the old manual when there's been updates made. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next section is 70 regarding refunds. We didn't have any changes to that. We didn't have any changes to, I guess, the next two, investigation fees and construction specifications. So dropping down to 12-10-100, right-of-way improvements and paving construction work. We basically removed effective dates that dated back to 2012 and 2013. We are now requiring all right-of-way work to have an ACI flat work finisher. Before 2012, this was a technician, which is a step down from the finisher. So the contractors have had an opportunity to receive those licenses and have people certified in that regard. So this language is really no longer necessary. So that's why we removed it. So the next section is 110. Got quite a few changes in here. In subsections A and B, the paragraphs were previously organized in paragraph format. So we kind of created lists within these, so it's more easily identified and understandable. Right-of-way improvements are now required for SEAs. So yeah, the subdivision exemption affidavit is what SEA stands for. And the reason why is a lot of SEAs are creating flag lots, which is basically 5 feet either on the alley or on the street. And we weren't able to get those SEAs to actually construct that 5 feet of sidewalk with those flag lots. So that's a reason why. We feel like that we need the sidewalk or critical links to infrastructure, and we sometimes miss these with infill developments. The reason being is a lot of times when the flag lot is created, there's an existing home on that lot, and we don't have a building permits that is going to come in that will require that sidewalk to be finished. So we just don't want a situation where there's a whole block of sidewalk done and then 5 feet that's undone. So that's really the reason there. We will still, all these properties will still qualify for a postponement of curb and sidewalk if no curb exists on the block. And that is essentially if the street alignment has not been set for a block by curb, then we're not going to require right-of-way improvements. Okay, moving on, in subsection B, we clarified new construction by adding terminology regarding residential dwelling, commercial and/or industrial structures. We've changes to driveways to new approaches. Previously, we never knew where to draw the line for changes to driveways. Many citizens would want to widen their driveway, and this old language would trigger existing right-of-way improvements. We just want to basically have the improvements made in front of the actual improvements that the property owner is wanting to be made. So that's the difference there. We've got a new subsection C that is intended to require right-of-way improvements that are adjacent to on-site construction only, even if not triggered by A or B above. This is mainly to correct right-of-way deficiencies that are affected by the work being done. Before, we would have a whole parcel right-of-way improvements, such as corner ADA ramps for driveway changes. So the driveway change will just basically affect the infrastructure, in front of that driveway or to the approach to the right-of-way. Subsection D, private streets. This used to be private road. We clarified when this was required. And now, instead of defining these when things are required based on parcels, we're now using units like Title 20 is doing. So we're the language update throughout this chapter, and then the next chapter 12-17 is really related. A lot of it is related to getting aligned with Title 20, which is the zoning code. Subsection F, local residential street width requirements. This was previously in the parking chapter under TEDs, specifically townhome exemption developments. So we want to pull this out of just applying this to TEDs and applying it basically citywide for local residential streets. So that's the change there. This was adjusted due to traffic issues from drive lanes that are too narrow. So per fire code, we need to have a certain width of the street to allow for emergency service access. Subsection K, regarding alleys, we removed most of the paving requirements and replaced it with dust suppression. And previously, we had worked with the health department on the actual requirements, and they determined that if we did dust suppression, we were in line with their regulations for existing unpaved alleys. So existing alleys, if they're part of the health department regulations, are if they're existing paved alleys, those alleys have to remain paved. We can't let those alleys go and go back to a gravel surface and not maintain those. So that's part of the regulations. Additionally, we don't have to pave existing unpaved alleys, as I mentioned. And essentially the reason why we're doing this is we've talked with Brian Hensel and our streets division. Just really, we don't, or the city overall, we don't have the resources to maintain all the alleys that are unpaved at this time if we were going to pave those. So those are the changes to section 1 110. Maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions related to any of that.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any hands up. Kevin, do you think you can increase the size of the document to cover more of your screen? That way we'll see it a little bit larger. Yeah,
Okay, yeah, that's better.
yeah, that's better. Keep going if you can.
Okay, thank you.
That's great.
Appreciate
Thanks.
that. So the next section is 120, construction location for city sidewalks. We added approved boulevard tree list after impact to healthy mature trees to the list of criteria where a boulevard sidewalk may be deviated from. So that was, I think, you know, this is partly, you know, responding to what Gwen had previously mentioned is we want to make sure that healthy trees have their place and we're not going to just cut them down based on sidewalk location. We can manage sidewalks around them in some cases. We also, in this section, we removed the ability for a deviation from boulevard sidewalks if sidewalks on adjacent properties are not consistent with boulevard sidewalks. We still want boulevard sidewalks if possible, regardless of what is on the adjacent property. If that adjacent property is curbside, if there's sidewalks on the adjacent property, if there's no sidewalks on the adjacent property, we still want boulevard sidewalks on that property. And that's for a number of reasons. Snow storage and trees and urban forest and things of that nature. The next section, 130, postponement, we didn't have any changes. The next section, 140, inspection by development services. We had the information previously in a list. We reformatted in the paragraph form. We differentiated between required inspections and recommended inspections. And then we had some small changes to wording describing when inspections must be requested and when it would potentially take place. The next two, 150 and 160, we didn't have any changes. Also, no changes to 170. Okay, Monty's catching up. All right. So section 180 is approaches to the right-of-way. We added information from 1210. 1210-180 that was previously 1217, or no, excuse me. Oh, okay. So we added information from previous 1212-170 and 1212-175 into this that states approach locations that do not meet requirements for sight distance, grade, proximity to intersections, and other hazardous or unsafe traffic condition as determined by the city engineer may be mitigated by controlling the approach configuration, i.e. right in, right out. So we did that to make sure that that we had the ability to control access or approach. If it was unsafe, we wanted to deem that as unsafe and be able to control the approach to the right of way. And we also added that approaches, added in number 8, that approaches must be a minimum of 5 feet from the property lines for curbside sidewalk and 1 foot for boulevard sidewalks unless the driveway is shared. This is necessary to get sidewalks to meet the requirements by PROAG between the driveways. Yeah, go ahead.
So PROAG is the accessibility guidelines within the public rights of way. So the terminology PROAG defines those ADA requirements for public rights of way.
Okay, next section 190 is approaches onto the public right of way, the approach width. We changed the maximum width for a double driveway from 20 feet to 24 feet due to overwhelming requests from the public that we think are being, when they thought we were being unreasonable. I mean, we always still had the ability to approve a 24-foot, but we decided that 24 foot is more appropriate. It's essentially the standard size of a double garage, so that's why what we changed there. And then all the language that you see on your screen right now, all that information is really design information, and it's going to be in the manual. It is in the manual, and therefore we're going to remove it from code. Next section is 200 rights of way. We didn't have any changes to that. Section 210, we moved some information from 1222, which is a parking chapter, into this. So any property that adversely affects the public infrastructure is required to mitigate that adverse effect. And what this is think about, a car wash that when a vehicle exits a car wash and accesses the public right of way, if they're bringing water onto that public street, that water can degrade the quality of that asphalt and cause additional repairs. So we can ask that car wash to mitigate that issue. So that's just one example of that. Next section, 220, no changes to that. And then the temporary sidewalk and construction traffic control that was in 1212 previously is being moved into the Public Works Manual. And so we're going to remove that language again under the guise of having the information in one place only and not duplicating the information. And then really there's no additional changes to the rest of the sections within this chapter. So that's the more specifics to the right-of-way improvements chapter 1210. Monty and I would be happy to answer any questions if folks have them at this point before we moved on to the next chapter.
Any questions from council members? Heidi?
So I just wanted to double check that I heard you correctly. So if you are building a house on a block that doesn't currently have any curb or gutter, you would be allowed to defer making those right-of-way improvements? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The property owner would be, a postponement would be filed for that property. Right?
Yeah, most instances.
Yeah, most instances.
Okay,
And
thank you.
and then we would look to make those improvements with the project.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Next I have Julie.
I would just like to ask, as Kevin mentioned at the beginning, that we could make this red line version available. I would ask that that gets attached to this item in eScribe. And it's just really hard to look at it when all the changes have been accepted and understand what we are changing. So that would be appreciated.
Yep.
Okay.
Stacy.
Thanks so much, Madam Chair. I guess I want to come back to Ms. West's question, and I'm concerned that, unfortunately, in a lot of parts of our town, when new, renovations happen or whatever, it's kind of how we start piecemealing the, infrastructure that neighborhoods need together. And with allowing for a deferral or delay, is there going to be a time frame where, say, okay, if an additional project doesn't come in, they still have to do it? If it transfers ownership of from one property owner to the other, how does that work? I am just concerned that, as some neighborhoods see some renovation, that they're missing an opportunity to get this vital infrastructure in place.
Yeah, one moment, let me get to. Goodness. There's a postpone. So, yeah. It's 1:30. Bear with me.
We're trying to get the appropriate spot.
Got this so large. And sorry. Section. All right, here it is. Right there. So here's the section on postponement. These are our current criteria for when a postponement would be supported, and it's typically one when the ultimate alignment and grade of the street has not been established. And this is what Kevin was going back to. If there isn't any curb and or sidewalk established for that street, we really haven't determined the width, drainage, and so forth. We typically support a postponement for that. The other criteria for postponement is adverse effects, including lack of right-of-way, topography, utility conflicts that may not allow those things to be put in as they currently are. And then the other one is what you identified is there's a city-initiated project to complete those right-of-way improvements within the next 2 years. From the time of the postponement, then that would be criteria to not have it done at that time of the development. Our postponements, the process involves basically an application and a request that's submitted up to currently the Development Services Director. And then that postponement, if supported, there's actually a recorded document that becomes a title condition to the property. So if the property does transfer, that's part of the title report. And so that would put them on notice of that. And that's something we started doing because of that not happening in the past, where there was something addressed with one property owner and that was transferred, but it wasn't clear to that new property owner what was going on.
And Monty, the period that it can be postponed for is in increments of 2 years, correct?
Well, the postponements, if we have a city-initiated project that's contemplated, that's planned to occur within 2 years from the time of that postponement. So basically, it's as we start discussing that postponement request, we would look into our CIP plan and kind of what we have scheduled for construction within the next several years. And if we have something targeted for that area, then we would support that postponement.
Okay, but it doesn't have a time frame associated with it.
No, so if you're asking if the postponement goes away in 2 years, if the project's not completed, I don't think that's the case.
Okay, okay.
The postponement is filed with the Missoula County Clerk and Recorder, and is placed on the parcel of land.
Okay. Are there any other questions from council members? Okay, I don't see any.
Okay, well, we'll move into 1217 parking facilities. So Monty's bringing this up on the screen, but we're not going to really scroll through this just because there's so much that was really moved out of this. There's really not a ton of content changes. It's the right-of-way information was moved into 1210. Other things were moved into, as applicable, they were moved into the manual. And so, or they're moved into the body of 1217, but just of the same chapter. But just as a real kind of brief overview is by updating the definitions of driveways and parking facilities, which are used throughout this chapter, we can combine a lot of the sections that we used to have, like you'll see on the screen 1212-100 through 1222-100 through 1222-130. So 100 through 130, all of those basically had driveway and parking facility standards for each of these different types of parcels. And so most of it was duplicative information, and again, it applied to driveways and parking facilities. So we basically, with the change in definitions, we basically said, here are your requirements for driveways and here are your requirements for parking facilities. And we stopped using the parcel definitions. And so we could basically remove all the duplicated language and text. So that's why this chapter, when you see it in a track change version, it's pretty much mostly stricken out because it was mostly duplicative. But yeah, and it also, again, corresponds to the zoning chapter title, or the zoning title 20, and it basically allows for Title 20 to set the number of parking spaces that are needed per a development, and this chapter then will tell them what they need to essentially build. Before, this chapter in Title 20 had some inconsistencies and required different things. So we're no longer going to be fighting with the planners on what an applicant needs to build. Okay, so specifically though, the purpose section, section 10, we took out wording regarding right-of-way because 1210 is the chapter regarding right-of-way improvements. The next section, section 20, we added private property paving permits and townhome exemption development to the list of things that we're calling out there that you need parking facilities for. Section 30, we didn't change anything in there. Section 40, we added private property to terminology in a couple of places, and removed a couple of sections pertaining to right-of-way work, and because we moved it into 1210. In the next section, 50, paving construction work, we removed references to ADA. This is a big one. We, through some research that we were doing, city engineering determined that we really couldn't be enforcing ADA requirements on behalf of the federal government. We actually have that language thank you, on private property. And we actually found that language. And so what we did do is we worked with our building division, and building per state law can enforce accessibility requirements. And so what we're going to look to do here is remove this section in 1217 and move parts of it into chapter 1538, which is a building chapter. So engineering will no longer be enforcing it because we can't, and building will be enforcing what they can through their code chapter 1538. You want to add anything to that? Okay. So in section 60, general requirements, we removed a lot of the duplicating information. We added specific cases for requiring driveway and parking facility paving. We moved some information into other sections, specifically as they related to driveways in section 80, which we'll get to in a couple minutes, and parking facilities later on in this chapter.
Kevin, I have
We clarified reveal height.
I have Julie Merritt with a question, I think. Julie?
I just concerned when we talk about the enforceability of ADA, and what I heard Kevin just say is that they're moving those items from this a portion of the municipal code because the engineering doesn't have the authority for enforcing that, and I appreciate that, and moving it instead into the building codes. Are there, and then I heard you say, Kevin, that that they would enforce what they can. Could you give us an example maybe of something that we have here in this title that really is not enforceable? I mean, something that we've had it on the books, but further study has revealed that we really don't have the authority to enforce.
Yeah, so this is Monty. So as we looked into this, a lot of our existing parking chapter code related to ADA was basically just a regurgitation of federal requirements, that being the ADA site accessibility guidelines, ADAG. And so the building code currently adopts those sections that are passed down through the state that are ANSI accessibility guidelines, which are very similar, and they coordinate with the ADA, with the ADAG requirements. And so those are adopted from the state down to the local jurisdictions under the building code. So they're not going away. These accessibility guidelines will still be requirements. They're just following the code as adopted from the state down to local jurisdictions. So they'll be applying they're very similar standards, but they're adopted through the building code, where ours were basically a regurgitation of ADAG requirements at the federal level.
And I'm gonna follow up a little bit on this too, is to say we've met with the folks in the building division. We have basically given them a draft of 1538, chapter 1538, to include the language that we can't include in 1217 any longer. And I believe they are pretty close to bringing that forward for adoption. It's just something that I think the building official needs to do and take on. But what engineering is prepared to do is to train the building officials who can and will be reviewing and enforcing the accessibility requirements. City engineering staff is going to train them on that review, and then out in the field for what they would look for with inspections. So we're going to have that. We're going to have that coordination and have that coverage.
And so this is site specific, and then the right of way will still be under the jurisdiction of the engineering division, and reviewed accordingly through Title 12 right of way improvements in Chapter 7 of the manual.
Okay.
Mirta, if I may, just a quick
Okay.
follow-up. I guess what I want to be clear on is that we're not in any way like dropping any balls or loosening up the ADA requirements with this change in any way, are we? Nobody wants.
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. We've had certain specific rules addressing to like the height of a sign, an on-site ADA space sign that is above and beyond what the federal standard would be. There's some issues pertaining to width of sidewalks abutting parking areas on private property, which we're coordinating with the building division to address those. And so we'll be maintaining some of those width requirements that are in addition and above and beyond what federal requirements are. So no, it's not going away. We're just transferring review responsibility and site inspection to a division that has that ability and authority under state statute and as it's adopted through the local building code. And then once again, PROAG will be our guiding document for public right-of-way ADA requirements, and we'll be looking at everything that is within a right-of-way or within a right-of-way easement.
Okay, Julie? You good? Okay, go ahead, Kevin or Monty.
Yeah, thank you. To continue, in section 60, we simplified where access is prohibited to unpaved areas. It's now on a case-by-case basis that meets the requirements of the Missoula City County Air Pollution Program and in their Chapter 8. We took out fire code requirements and referred to the adopted code of the Missoula Fire Department. We also made it so all parking facilities, not just 5 spaces or more, shall provide a snow storage plan. Added some prohibited places to store snow. And this is one of those locations where I think we can add some language, as Glenn mentioned earlier, what we have right now is prohibited places because of vehiculars. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna move on. That's just, I'm getting into the weeds. So lastly, we expanded on-site pedestrian and vehicular connection that may be required. So we want the ability to require pedestrian connections and vehicular connections where it's appropriate and beneficial. So that's the information and general requirements. The information in the next section, 70 private property parking facility maintenance. We removed the ADA references when we focused on paving permit requirements. And in the next section, 80 construction requirements for driveways. So this is that new section that really takes the place of a lot of the information that was in the previous 100 through 130 sections. So we added the ability to use self-draining solid surface materials such as interlocking pavers for driveways. And then section 90, which is requirements for parking facilities. We, so for parking facilities with 5 or more spaces is now required to be designed by a professional architect or engineer. This used to only be triggered if it was a multifamily or larger. We added flexibility to separate paved and unpaved areas. Previously, this was only essentially done by curbs or bollards, but now we added other things to restrict that movement. We removed drive-through requirements. These will be designed. These will be required. They still will be required to be designed by a professional and to not inhibit or adversely affect the adjacent right-of-way. So that language is still in there, but we're basically allowing for the professionals to use their professional stamps and to get the industry standards to give us that information and to tell us how it would work for those drive-through facilities. And then lastly, we made some minor language changes to section 100. So that's really it for 1217. Again, we will forward the track changes versions of these 2 chapters so you can see basically what we did. And yeah, if there are any more questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
I don't see anyone raising their hand for now.
Okay. So then lastly, and I'd previously talked about 1228, chapter 1228, that's the visibility obstructions, and basically we're simplifying that to remove our local site visibility standards at intersections to adhere to the more nationally accepted standards within AASHTO. So that's a simple change that we wanted to make in that particular chapter, and that's really all that we had for you today.
Great. Are there any questions or comments from council members? Okay. I don't see any hands up. I appreciate it, Kevin. This is a lot of work to go through all the chapters and make sure that everything is jiving with Title 20 as well. and that we have the most updated information. So it's appreciated. This will be, we set the public hearing for the 5th. And since we keep we keep it open for an extra week, I believe that the following Monday would be the 12th, and I think that's a holiday. So I think final action on this would be on the 19th. So until then, Kevin, if you can make the, oh, I see. Yeah, I think there might be a change here. Jeremy, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Maritza. Jeremy Keene, Public Works Director. I just wanted to suggest that maybe we leave this open in committee until next week to give everybody an opportunity to look at the redlined version of the changes. And if we need to come back and make any other adjustments to the language, we would have next week in committee to do that.
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea. This was a lot of information for everyone to digest. And I'm sure that by looking at the red line version of this, we can all maybe provide some more feedback. If you have any questions, that would allow some time for staff to get back to answer all those questions or make any other changes. So I think that sounds good. Brian?
Sorry. So on that point, I just wanted to be clear. So you want to schedule a committee meeting for sure. We just have to, the deadline for that is tomorrow. So if we want a committee meeting and to keep it open, then we need to make that determination and get it scheduled into committee either next week, or perhaps were you thinking about another week?
Yeah, I think we already set the public hearing. So I think as long as we meet those deadlines, if we can squeeze in another committee meeting, if needed or wanted, I think we have at least the 30th to do that. So next week.
Yeah. So so I mean, I can see some value in that. I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear that we'll need to have that scheduled so that it can appear on the agenda on Monday night.
But do you think it needs we don't need a new referral for this?
No,
It's just keeping it on the agenda.
Yeah, you can just hold over, you can just keep the meeting open, but you're gonna have to make sure that, Kirsten knows that, and you've allotted the amount of time that you want for it, so.
Okay. I don't think we need a lot of time unless council has a lot of questions, but I think that if staff can make the document with the revisions available to council, we can all submit questions and at the next meeting just hash that out as quickly as possible, so we don't need to schedule that much time. Does that sound like a plan, Kevin and Jeremy?
I think that sounds great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
One other business, Mierta, is my screen shared again? It's that language if you wanted it from the ordinance bill.
Okay, so we have, sorry, I think I need bifocals.
They don't
Okay,
help. I still can't read it.
Thank you. Okay, so now the the motion would include the addition of chapter 12.01, which is the general provisions chapter that was added. And that is in addition to what we already had in our motion when we set the public hearing, which is to repeal chapter 12.12 curb, sidewalks and parking and replace it with chapter 12.10 named right-of-way improvements. It repeals chapter 12.22 parking facilities and replaces it with chapter 12.17 parking facilities. It creates a new chapter 12.02 definitions, and it updates chapter 12.28 obstructions. So all of that in addition to chapter 12.1 general provisions. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So we will coordinate to make sure that if we're going to have a public hearing, that we get that on the schedule. We can work with Kristen and everyone to make that possible. In the meantime, if you guys can share the document with all the updates so that council can take a look at it and provide feedback or ask any questions, that would be really helpful.
Okay, I'll send those to Kirsten and Marty while we're still on the virtual meeting here.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Monty, for all your work. It's appreciated. Okay, so now we move to our next item on the agenda, which is a presentation of the revised Missoula City Public Works Standards and Specifications Manual, and Jeremy Keene is here to present.
Thanks.
And Ida.
Thanks, Jeremy Keene with Public Works again. Ida Sager is here as well with the Engineering Division. She's going to handle the presentation. Ida, are you going to share your screen or do you want me to share mine?
Kevin had it loaded up, I believe, but if you want to do it, that whatever works for everyone. I just can't share mine.
Tell me what you want to do.
Oh, yes, if you could share your screen.
Okay, thanks.
Please. Thank you.
Okay, I'll just give a quick introduction and then hand off to Ida here to go through it. So we're coming back to you with the final Public Works Manual. It was originally presented in July to Public Works Committee. We've had several rounds of internal reviews, and it was made available for external review and the general public for about 4 weeks in July. So from July 1st to July 31st, it was available. We notified stakeholders directly by email. These were the engineering consultants, construction companies and builders and the development community to let them know that this was happening and see if they had any comments. We've now incorporated those comments that we received into the final version of the manual. And we're planning to have this take effect on November 18th, concurrent with the Title 12 amendments that you just looked at. The new manual is not perfect. We recognize there are still some things we're going to have to work out. We intend this to be a living document, as Kevin said previously. We plan to update it annually, and I think initially we may need to update it more than once a year to work out some of the bugs. But it's a big improvement in terms of where you find information and how things work together. We'll probably be back later this year with an additional update. We have 2 additional chapters that are yet to be completed. This is a chapter on general provisions that are related to the Montana Public Works standard specifications. This is something that's done at a statewide level, and we're waiting for them to update those standard specifications. And then once they do, we'll incorporate those into our manual. And then the second chapter that's yet to be complete is a section on construction within the right-of-way that just pulls together all of our insurance requirements, bonding, permitting, things like traffic control, public notices, other administrative requirements that that we want to just consolidate into one place. And then, this is a companion manual to the Parks and Rec manual. And so we've tried to structure this so that they work together and they refer to each other. We'll need to use this manual a little bit to see how it's working. And I expect we need to come back and make some clarifications there as well. So our goal today is to present an overview of the final comments and changes, and then proceed with adoption of the manual as an administrative rule. And like Kevin said, as we have future updates, we'll bring it back to council and have an opportunity for public input when we're making additional changes. So with that, I'll pass it off to Ida, and she'll take you through.
Thanks, Jeremy. If you could please slide to slide number 7, and we could start in with the chapter improvements, chapter 3 improvement plans, since you've provided an update. Just as a side note, we did contact WGM to see where they are with the final status of the Montana Public Works Standards Manual, and it's currently in the final draft stage. And they will be passing it on to us, a preliminary copy, as soon as they receive it. Okay, for the chapter 3 improvement plans, what I'll be doing now is just highlighting what the changes are. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those. First of all, we added the language that we intend to update the manual annually, but however, with this initial rollout, we're going to probably have at least another iteration of changes to incorporate chapters 1 and 2 to the manual, and then also as an as needed basis. So we're projecting probably one revision before next November and at least another. We added language to the manual with regard to the stage 3 process, which will envision the fact that the stage process review for stage 3 was originally about 50% complete. We've now included that review when they submit these plans should now be about 90% complete from a review from a stage 2. And we included specific language for the engineering community and developers to understand that. Also, we define more clearly what the difference is between the site development project and the public infrastructure project, where the site development projects are really initiated through a commercial and a residential permit, commercial and residential building permits, the zoning compliance permits, the conditional use permits, and subject exemption affidavits. And that also includes the TEDs. We also revised language that will relate to the GIS system to be used with the public infrastructure project. Next slide, please. As I hit, we clarified the language for the GIS, such as ground versus grid, the accuracy of the submissions, and erosion control, and the symbols. We added a general timeline for city review so that it's more definitive, so that expectations are set both for us, the developer, and the engineer of record. We clarified the submittal requirements for both subdivision and zoning compliance reviews, whereas I had mentioned before, the stage 2 checklist previously was not being submitted. So we more clarified that process so that we've got more of a coordination with the zoning compliance permit for TEDs, the townhome exemption development process. So therefore, when we accept a stage 2 checklist for city engineering, they're also going to be required to submit a zoning compliance permit for a TED. The checklist is going to be required at both times so that the developments are being reviewed both by the city engineering staff and the review infrastructure needs to support the development. Next slide, please. And so that covers the improvements chapter. Now we're on the water system, which really we had a really good review process, as Jeremy had mentioned. Before we rolled this out, we first had it, we had an internal review with the multiple agencies, and we also had the external review. So we have included most of all review comments that we had received. So for water, we just found the one for the wet utility main best practices. We added a whole complete section where the wet utilities, of course, refers to the water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater mains. And these rules need to be followed when designing the wet utility mains. And if the designer engineer feels that it's not practical to follow these, they're going to need to request a deviation to the rules with a written description as to why they don't feel they need to follow these practical rules. And the city staff will then make a determination whether or not the deviation will be accepted or denied. Next, we added a requirement for the engineer or the Missoula water representative to inspect the pressure testing apparatus prior to the start of the test. We required that all equipment used in a pressure test should be intended for use in possible water systems and should only be used for conducting pressure tests in potable water systems. We added a new specification for flange gasket materials and installation torque. And we modified the appendix to require backflow prevention. Next slide, please. Sanitary sewer was also, didn't require major changes. We added some technical specifications for the city-owned lift stations. And we added references to Chapter 4 for the wet utilities that I just previously discussed. Next slide, please. The stormwater system, it incorporates the MMC 13.27 that became effective back in April. And these requirements were generally made more in an effort from, as we had said, the consultants, the developers, and contractors. We clarified the green infrastructure and low impact development. This is not a requirement, but it is encouraged. We clarified the geotech reports, clarified the infiltration testing so that it is performed by a licensed engineer with infiltration testing experience, not just the geotech engineers. And we updated the infiltration testing procedures to better emulate the infiltration seen in dry wells and to allow them to be performed using the existing equipment. We also removed the requirements for the groundwater study, and we modified any language for deeper dry wells if necessary to get to a higher infiltration layer. Okay, Chapter 7. Jordan, I know that last time we met, you had some questions and comments regarding the traffic control. Please know that is on our radar and we're still working on it, and it's going to be a work in progress. So hopefully we will be able to roll out some more information regarding the traffic control through our next revision or the one thereafter. We added reference to the documents, including the Activate Missoula 2045, the NACTO, which is the National Association of City Transportation Officials, and the UVC, also known as the Uniform Vehicle Code. We deleted the addition date of reference documents and added a note that the city adopts most current version of all references. And we clarified plan submittal requirements that we kind of discussed back in Chapter 3. And it's more specific in a checklist so that the developers and the engineers of record know what the expectations are for when they submit plans to us. And we also added a requirement for the coordination with the city engineer prior to the traffic information impact studies. And we also included what the submittal information will be and the expectations. We changed the section header for the intersection site distance. We clarified the requirements for street horizontal and vehicle curves, the chip seal pavement, curb markings, street section depths, geotextile material, intersection alignment, and grading for the new development. And we also changed to allow for the use of asphalt milling in lieu of the new pavement in existing unpaved alleys. Erosion control, we did not identify, nor did we receive any major or significant changes. So chapter 8 should probably be the same as when we rolled it out in the original and initial rollout back in July. And it was also incorporated in the MMC 13.27 that was adopted back in April. Standard drawings. This is a large effort in that it affects the span of the manual. So we did have some significant changes. We modified the details as necessary for the city accepted installation methods. Those details were also, our research indicated that they were also adopted by other regional cities for the bioswale detail and the curb cut detail based on our experience that we had with Mary Avenue. We added some materials to ensure the quality of surface improvements, such as the telespar signposts and the differing of the thicknesses for the specific subbase and base course materials. And of course, we updated for safety requirements so that we have better alignment with the public right-of-way access guidelines and the site distance triangle updates. We added language as to more clarification as to what jurisdiction is over a project such as the MDT or the city. We added a 24-inch diameter combination inlet that will work for the dry wells or smaller inlets that I previously talked about. We updated the round storm water grate lid detail for a bike-friendly grate and the ADA grate. And we updated stormwater manhole cover detail to bring it up to current standards and to match the basic details for the sewer manhole cover so that they're consistent. Also, we updated the erosion control details to bring them up to our current best practices and match what contractors are currently seeing at the project sites. So what's next? The question is, this will also depend upon what changes we made to the Title 12 for streets, sidewalks, and public places. And so we expect that it will be adopted by the administrative rule. And once those changes are made, we're estimating the manual to be adopted by the November 18th timeline. And any changes that we do make are going to be accessible on the Engage Missoula website so that the engineering community, developers, and the general public will all be informed. When the transition takes place, what we'll do is when the stage 3 state plan review is submitted to us, that will dictate which manual adoption and requirements they will be required to be submitted. So for example, if we receive something prior to November 18th of 2020, that will go with the old standards of the submission requirements and manual changes. Whereas if it's something that we receive, for example, in March of 2021, that will go under the new adopted manual. I appreciate the opportunity to give you an update as to what the changes were since we last met in July. And I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Ida. That was great. I have Julie Merritt. Go ahead, Julie.
I just want to say, I know this is a lot of detailed work. Great job. I really appreciate the level of effort of keeping the members of the public who are stakeholders in this process engaged and involved in the process. That is really important, and I hope it will lead for less work on both ends when everybody understands what the rules of engagement are. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think this document is full of information that will provide clarity and as you said, Ida, it will set the expectations for everyone that needs to create work and development essentially. So this is great. Jeremy.
So I just wanted to add that you can see that this manual has a lot of technical information in it. And the concept that we're putting forward here is that Title 12 spells out the regulations for what is required. And then the manual explains how you actually implement those regulations. So it's a good division of responsibilities between the Title 12 code and then a technical manual that the practitioners can use. Obviously, we don't expect you to dive into all of this, but certainly we want to know from your constituents what's working and what's not. And as we go forward and have opportunities to update it, we really want to work on those trouble spots to make sure we are providing clear, consistent direction on what we need to see and making sure that the process is as efficient as it can be.
Great. And Jeremy, the two chapters that you'll be working on are Chapter 1, General Provisions, and Chapter 2, the construction within the right-of-way, correct?
That's correct. So those are the two pieces that you'll see are still missing, these Chapter 1 and Chapter 2.
Okay. Great. Any questions from council members? Okay, I don't see any, but I'm sure that both Jeremy and Ida would be happy to get comments or feedbacks or questions from you all. So if you get a chance, do take a look at the manual and send any questions to either one of them. Jordan.
Thanks for the update, everyone. And Ida, thanks for the remarks on the transportation questions from before. I was thinking that it might be a good idea to also hold this along with the Title 12 updates so that people can review it and come back next week. Is that okay with you, Mirta?
It's okay with me. I think that if we if you take a look at it, read portions or all of it, whatever you you need to do to be well informed, so that if we meet next week, we can make it a really productive meeting. That would be great.
Great, thanks.
Okay, I don't see anyone in the public who might want to provide any comment. So we will see you again next week. And thank you again for the presentation.
Great. Thank you all. Have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you. And that is all we have on our agenda for today. So with that, we would be adjourned. Thank you, everyone.